In the little town of Jigger, there's a little post office. From here you can mail off your postcards. Maybe one of them will feature the little town of Jigger. I'm Jeff Dewey, and in this latest edition of our continuing travel series, I'm sending some word back to you. That's why we're calling this Lost Louisiana Postcards. There are all sorts of postcards. Some are just a picture, sometimes not even a caption. Patterson, the old church. Welsh. Not much here yet in this photo, but Marksville's pretty much the same. Alexandria, home of Army maneuvers before the big war, and in this card booklet, during. It's a hand-colored shot, one of the post office there. The postmark is 1942. Franklin Parish is old, placid to the eye. So is the Jigger Post Office and General Store, yet it's also the hub of activity.
Thank you. You want those mail today? Is there our bills? Oh, yes. I'll get them off today for you. Thank you very much.
The Charles Harris General Merchandise. Patsy Harris runs the post office the old way, with an eye to serving one person at a time, but then again only one person can stand at her window at a time.
And I've been postmaster for nearly 28 years. 1933, when my mother-in-law and father-in-law established the store and they got the post office established, they had to have a name for it. So they sent in the name, several names, to the post office department. And my husband, who was the first grandchild and the first child in the family, they called him Jigger. That was one of his nicknames. His grandmother had quite a few for him, but that was one of them. And he said, put down Jigger. And his mother said, no, they won't select that. And he said, please. So they put it down, and when it came back, they had selected Jigger. And so that's where Jigger got its name, from my husband.
Come here every day.
Get a mail.
Get the mail, get the checks.
And get Cokes.
And get Cokes.
Cokes and candy.
Cokes and candy. Me and my husband.
The cash register is old. The scale on which she'll weigh you out a half-pound of galvanized nails is old. Patsy Harris's friendships are old, too.
Alan Taylor comes every morning and brings my mail, and he brings it and comes back by in the afternoon and picks it up. And he's out of the Winsboro office. He's an HC carrier. And he takes Fort Necessity their mail and then delivers on the routes also.
When a letter gets here, it hardly needs an address. Patsy Harris knows where everybody lives and everybody's box.
Come back. Thank you.
You're welcome.
People don't write like they used to, and letters and mail letters. And I have a cousin that's 86 years old, and she writes the most beautiful letters and has the most beautiful handwriting. And you don't find many people that write anymore. That kind of letter, and it's so newsy and so, the English is so great, But it really is a lost art, I think, that writing is, just letters, and they just pick up the phone now or email it. It's just such a joy to get a letter, I think,
There's something to be said when you find the real lost Louisiana. There's something to be pondered about the lost art of letters, but the store, the post boxes, the safe made in Shreveport, they say it better. The banjo case, the baseball cards, soda pop bottles, and Patsy Harris.
That's good. Just look around. Any way I can help you, just holler. Can I help you, Edward?
I need a Butterfinger.
A Butterfinger. That's too good to be true. I thank you. Here. Okay. Come back. You feeling better? Yeah. Okay. Come back.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Now you know whose hands touched your postcard should it arrive from Jigger.
I'll tell you the nice thing that happened to the Postal Service is when they went to self-adhesive stamps. I really enjoy those.
This was the Baton Rouge Savings and Loan Association in the 1950s. What great post-deco lines and dynamic placement of a public clock. Well, a good thing, lo and behold, In Baton Rouge, it's still here. I like post offices, utilities, and service shops. Along our route across Lost Louisiana, we have to stop for gas and directions, but this filling station hasn't a drop. It stands alone on the Cajun prairie, a lost-looking thing from a lost Louisiana. If this were 1938 or 1948, it would not be so odd, and Kermit Doucet would feel right at home.
Well, that's what you would have seen if you would have gone to an old Gulf station in the 30s, 40s, 50s.
You'd have actually seen this particular model right here.
Yes, that's a national pump. It's got porcelain panels, stainless steel top, and stainless steel sides. Very durable.
And well made.
Very well made.
Because it was made before 1950.
That's made in the 30s.
That's how you know it was well made.
Oh, I tell you what, it was well made because it was made to last forever.
That's right. The crank gas pumps out front, the tire rims that hold the water hose, the air machine that didn't dare charge good customers a quarter. It's all here. Doucet used to collect different brands of gas station stuff. Now it's the uranium orange and steel blue of Gulf oil all the way. Do you ever actually go down like on the road when you're driving around or when you're just tooling around and you see something on the side of the road?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, and you stop. And, you know, where I get, a lot of times I'll see a station that's no longer a Gulf station, but I can see some of the paint peeling out and I can see the orange porcelain and you can nail it. And you stop, and I stopped at a station the other day and I told a guy, I said, this is an old Gulf station. He said, yeah. I said, you got anything Gulf? He said, no, I don't have anything at all. I said, you mind if I look around? He said, no. We found all kinds of books in the 60s and the 70s. We found 2 cans with the Gulf on it. He found another oil drain can, and he's got still a bunch of stuff that's Gulf, and I'm working on them, getting a few more things. But,
that's terrific.
He gave me most of the stuff. You actually pump the oil with this pump into the quart bottle, and then you put the top on it, and as you serve the customer, you remove this little top and pour it in the car. Now, the drawback on this is you never were really sure what you were getting. So Gulf in 1928 were the first ones to go to the cans, and they had tamper-proof, refinery sealed. So you were guaranteed on what you were getting from the quart can.
Very sturdy.
The reason that they're rare is they cut them up and made duck blinds out of them.
See the USA in your Chevrolet. America is asking you to call. Drive your Chevrolet through the USA. America's the greatest land of all.
Kermit Doucet's garage is a fanciful figment of his imagination and a delight to our collective consumer consciousness. The cars inside are big, 2.5 tons at least. You have to pry him for a reflective answer, though, as to why this collector does what he does, why anyone would want to hold on to such commonplace memorabilia.
1955 Cadillac Series 62.
Vroom.
I think probably that everybody likes to return to a time that they will remember as happy and they were comfortable with, and when they think about their youth, even if things wasn't real good when you were young, you were healthy and you were able to tolerate more. And when you look back on the problems you had when you were young, they're so minor compared to what you have today, because as people grow, their problems grow. We always like to return to something simpler. Families only had one car back then. I had a bicycle. I had a paper route. I worked at the gas station. Things were very simple compared to what they are today. I remember that price, and I remember cheaper prices when they used to have gas wars. The oil companies would get in the wars on the prices. And it'd get down to 16, 17 cents a gallon when I was a teenager. Matter of fact, I have a couple of prices here that went on a visible pump. This was 6 cents for a gallon of gas plus 6 cents tax. And this
Because it had gotten so low that
the tax was as much as the gas. And
Yeah.
here's an 8 and a 7, 15 cent. And when I was a kid, I remember very well, gas stations would have a sign that says, this is a tax collection station, and we also sell gas.
as Americans, we remember that logo on everything from sealing wax to bug spray.
This old oil, this old gas, this old insect repellent, this old car polish.
They sold fan belts,
Fan belts, hoses, anything for the car. household oil, lighter fluid, penetrating oil, electric motor oil. This is the salesman's sample that he brought to show you the different types of oil and the refining process. This is furniture polish. This is furniture polish, and then this is household lubricant. This is a Fry May West visible pump.
A May West.
May West because of the shape.
Oh, this is really heavy. Brass.
Brass, solid brass. And the way this thing worked, it was mechanical. You pumped the gas from an underground storage tank into the glass cylinder all the way to the top. And then the reason it's so tall, it gravity fed into the car, and you sold even-numbered gallons.
And then you'd lift up the hose
to get a little bit extra.
to get that extra. As familiar as all the icons are, it's still a lost-looking place, off the beaten path and maybe out of mind. All this Gulf oil stuff. Funny thing, you can't buy gas here. This is just some common hardware. But over time, maybe it's come to represent what we'll probably not see again. The service station dedicated to service.
And here's the girl, authorized dealer that signs for
Permit a duce, proprietor.
Proprietor.
Sometimes you find lost Louisiana in a wrong turn. You have to go halfway around the town square in Opelousas to enjoy the old parish bank and trust. In Tallulah, we swerved onto Bear Creek Road. It turned out to be the right turn. What was once lost now is found. There's a rundown hunting camp on a back road in Madison Parish. The high porch is long gone, but the wooden overhangs and rusted roof have kept the elements at bay for nearly a century. This is the lodge of the Bear Lake Club, an old-style hunting association from the last century. Now, you can trek far enough into the woods anywhere in Louisiana and come across old camps, abandoned as well as still used in season, but this one is special. Would you believe this one has, just this year, been placed on the National Register of Historic Places? Larry Bird is curator of the Political History Collection at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, and he's come to Tallulah today to see this husk.
The hunting camp, really what you're looking at is not necessarily a hunting camp, but it's a fish and conservation camp.
Significant?
Well, I think so, if only because this is the only one that remains that has a Roosevelt association with it that you can actually come see.
In the first years of this century, President Teddy Roosevelt was the leading spokesman for the conservationist philosophy. For about 30 years, gentlemen hunters had been forming clubs with attention to nature conservation. Roosevelt's status helped and was helped by the movement. Why does Roosevelt come to Louisiana?
Well, to hunt black bear.
He just wanted to kill himself a bar.
Well, no, I mean, there are political considerations, he becomes president after the assassination of William McKinley. He's the vice president becoming president. And so part of what he's doing is shoring up his southern flank of Republican support within the party. Certainly that's one of the reasons he came here in 1902 to Mississippi, Louisiana, for his first, on the occasion of his first bear hunt.
When he didn't shoot one, the locals brought a beaten-up cub to him, all tied up. But Teddy found no sport in that, and when he spared the poor animal, the national press coined a craze for kids. You guessed it, the teddy bear.
And almost from that moment, you can see the wheels in Roosevelt's head spinning to come back and really complete and have a successful hunt.
When Roosevelt returned to the Delta to finally shoot a bear, even this Yankee was cheered in Vicksburg, and eventually the tiny farm town of Tallulah. This is the scene, as everyone turned out to see the president in 1907. Roosevelt kept a journal of his hunts and wrote to his daughter all about this one. He never actually says this is the exact building, but his description fits this place perfectly. Martin Williams will soon be 94 years old. He was a good friend of the camp's caretaker and best guide, Willie Goodall.
We talk hours and hours about it, because he must have made kind of a hit with the president. But he's a very intelligent man. Used good language, no cursing, no bad language.
He's a black man?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Your friend, Mr. Goodall, the guide with Teddy Roosevelt, what did he tell you about?
Oh, one of the nicest men he'd ever been around. And he made friends with him. I think he talked with him more than any of the black folks because he had a conversation. And you could tell the president some things, he'd make him laugh. That's what they like about it. And he was that kind of man. And he was a good, sharp shooter. So they practiced like out here for to go hunting.
It's taken a lot of dedicated attention, phone calls, and pleadings by Tallulah resident Marilyn Bedgood to get the camp listed on the National Register. She's called the press many times to come out and do a story, yet doesn't want to be in the spotlight.
Told me she had a Roosevelt Bear Camp. You seldom get calls like that or have an opportunity to come see what you've looked at in photographs and what other people have just thought perhaps didn't exist.
So for you, there is a thrill in
Right.
seeing this.
Right.
And
Well, it's the real thing. You don't have to recreate it. It's very much here, and you can see what it looked like in your head from Roosevelt's own writings and the way he described it. You know, on the steep, bold bank of the bayou, you know, the Tensas River area, and it's the real thing.
And what are the stories you heard of what a caretaker at this camp did? What did he do every day?
Well, you had several people doing different things. You had one man, this boy in Washington, Cooks. He took care of pumps and water and things like that. Then you had his wife took care of cooking for, like, you know, the fellas taking care of the wards. I mean, the mules and horses, and just doing with the camp, scouting it, going ahead and get the snakes out, things of that nature.
The attention, everyone around here agrees, should be focused on preserving this landmark. A little piece of political history you wouldn't know much about if people around here weren't so proud of it. And so happy to recall one hunt, one time, such an exciting time, so long ago. Lost Louisiana will continue browsing some old postcards. Grab the postcards and let's hit the road to see what's still standing. Homer still uses its old courthouse. Monroe offers a surprising number of landmarks in my card collection. The Washita River always photographs well. One afternoon we were enjoying the Washita in Monroe when I had to flag down Harry DeSoto.
You used to go to these amusement parks where you had a little paddle wheel, you paddle it with your feet. I said, you're not going to make one of them, you know, that has a motor on it, you know, just for the hell of it.
A handmade paddle wheeler. Harry DeSoto might have been happy with a speedboat or houseboat like people use on this side of the Washita, but this welder made himself an old-time paddle wheeler with a new Toyota engine.
This is the throttle here. This is the thrust. That throws the hydraulic in gear. This is your hydraulic temperature, hydraulic pressure here. This is your amp meter. This is the forward, and this is the reverse. The reason I got it notched out is because so if somebody throws it out of gear, it won't go in reverse, you see, and there's a safety feature about it.
This really looks like a fun boat to drive.
Well, it is. I mean, it's maneuverable, and you don't get tired. I mean, you can just walk back and forth on it. You're not confined, you know, no, just to one place. You know, you can walk around. It's not just sitting on a bass rig. You know, you move on pretty good with it.
Off they paddle, fishing by night and taking in the scenery by day. They've been to New Orleans, 290 water miles from home port in Alexandria. It took considerably longer up current. They've been to Shreveport, 143 miles, as well as up to Arkansas.
We're on our way to Washita Lake, and we should be there by tomorrow.
Postcards offer matter-of-fact views of things you've never imagined. I don't know when there was a pontoon bridge across the Red River at Montgomery. In this postcard, the world's largest river barge carries locomotives at Avondale. This is how a train crossed the river until Huey built a bridge. There's a new slogan at the New Orleans and Gulf Coast Railway. It says the city that brought us everything boiled and fried now pours on the steam. This railway is the genuine article, a short line freight company in northern Plaquemine Parish. Now, sharing the company's tracks is a blast from the past, taking tourists, school kids, and romantics back in time a full century.
Probably 3 dozen valves up there that you've got to know what to do with, and the gauges that you're looking at are steam gauges and air gauges for the air brakes. And you have 2 water glasses in it, one for the engineer and one for the fireman, which are probably the most important things in the cab, because you've got to know where the water level is in the boiler. It can be a very dangerous machine if the water gets below the crown sheet of the firebox.
Johnny C. helped get this 1901 locomotive back on its wheels. Now he's living every kid's dream. He's the engineer of a steam locomotive.
I always say a monkey could run a diesel. It takes a real locomotive engineer to run a steam engine.
Because of the feel, because of what's going on there in your head and in your hands?
Well, the steam locomotive talks to you. You can feel it. You know, you can listen to the stack, and you can listen to the valves, or the chug that you hear coming out the stack. And that tells you what the engine's doing, how hard it's working, and whether you got enough valve travel, because you're able to set the valve travel with what's known as a Johnson bar or reverser. And when you're starting the engine off with a heavy load, you put it what we call down in the corner. And you're using a lot of steam when you do that. And as you get the train moving, you start working it back to the company notch, they call it, which is more economical. You're using less steam and you're working off of steam expansion once you get the thing moving. So there's a lot to listen to and go by, from the sound of the engine.
Baldwin Locomotive Works number 1744 was once a rusted hulk. About 2 years ago, these steam enthusiasts found it in Texas. Gary McCord is another of the dedicated restorers who tends the 85-ton engine's huge maintenance needs.
She was in really bad condition. When they first asked me if I would come to work for them, I went over in Fort Worth and climbed up on her one day and looked around, and I shook my head, and I thought to myself, there's no way they're ever going to restore this thing or put it back together in operating condition.
You're impressed by it, though, aren't you?
Oh, very much so. The people back then that came up with all of this stuff were very smart, and in 1901, this was the cutting edge of technology.
Pulled along are 1950s era passenger cars. The double-deckers afford a view of the Mississippi River over the levee. The excursion down to Myrtle Grove is only 10 miles but takes 2 hours round trip.
It's fun to watch the kids' faces, isn't it?
It sure is. We need more young people that are interested in this, so that as the older guys like John can teach me, and then when I become older, then there'll be some young person that wants to know that I can teach them, because there are no schools that you can go to. It's all, on-the-job training. You have to start out at the bottom as a hostler, kind of like, a grease monkey that gets a locomotive ready in the morning, and then you move up to a fireman, and then finally move up to an engineer. But if you can't work on it, and you don't understand it, and you can't fix it, then you can't run it.
The star of the show, of course, never lets the kids down. The Big Easy, as it's called, belts out another note, another blast of steam. A lot of that's for show, of course, but deep in the hearts of the guys who brought number 1744 back from a rusty grave, there's a genuine passion.
My previous career was on the AT&SF, or Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe. And I quit them in 1993 just to operate steam locomotives, because that's what I wanted to do. I'm a fellow that finds diesel locomotives distasteful. We call them dismal locomotives. I've loved steam all my life. I was born in 1940 and was lucky enough to see the last 20 years of steam. And I grew up wanting to run steam engines, and that's what I do now.
It makes you wonder who's having more fun, the passengers or these aficionados of the good old days. In stacks of old postcards, you'll likely find a bunch featuring Bourbon Street. Less often, you'll come across the Blue Room at the Roosevelt. When in New Orleans, this postcard reads, "Visit the top of the Mart." You can only visit that wondrous lounge in pictures now. We showed up just in time for a final spin. In 1964, the brand new New Orleans World Trade Center was called the International Trade Mart, and way up there was the top of the Mart Lounge. It takes a second elevator to get up to the highly decorated bistro at the top. When those doors open, you gasp. Great Jackie Gleason, it's all still here.
The look of love is in your eyes. A look your smile can't disguise. The look of love.
An odd thing about the top of the Mart is that it hasn't changed much in 3.5 decades. The red velvet drapes, gold swags, and slingback chairs are all throwbacks to the martini and cigarette sophisticado set a la mode Dean Martin, James Bond, Las Vegas et al.
I can't hardly wait to hold you, feel my arms around you. How long I've waited.
From high above the traffic, from the best view anywhere, Jerome Stedman has watched his beautiful city spin.
At that time, the senior proms were a big thing, and all schools had them. Of course, now no one has them. The schools are concerned with the liability aspects of it, and they wouldn't think of even sponsoring one. But at that time, it was a big event, and that was before tourism was really a factor, and our business was probably 90–95% local business at that time. And another factor, there was no place you could see the river from the street level. All the wharves were straight, just solid wharves. You couldn't see it, the ferry even. There was no moonwalk, no river walk. Even on Canal Street, there was one of the United Fruit or someone had a banana warehouse there, and if you knew the right people, you'd run down and get a few bananas for lunch.
It revolves at what pace?
3 feet per minute. It takes an hour and a half to make a complete turn. You can't feel it, you can't hear it. If you look at the window frames, you can see that the furniture is moving.
But an hour and a half to make one revolution, that's really slow. It seems very slow, doesn't it?
Yes, except that mechanically it must be a problem to make them any bigger, because this is one of the largest ones in the world. It's 24 miles across the lake. It's about 14 from here to there, so you're looking at around 35–40 mile view. But that's the best of all views.
On a clear day, you can practically see forever. You can see Mandeville, really?
Yes.
This is really nice to look at night, I'll bet, because it's backlit and they can see lots of these nice colors. Young professionals, the yuppies we might call them, are all interested in that Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra music and smoking the cigar and having the sophisticated martini. It seems like you've got the built-in lair for that. This is the sophisticated swingers bar.
That's right, yeah. I think that's why everyone wants to buy the memorabilia now that's take something home with them and keep it there to remind them of the good times they had here and their special occasions.
The new owner, some out-of-town celebrity married to one of those supermodels, is going to replace all this authentic stuffing with new stuff to evoke the retro 60s martini and cigarette sophisticado set a la Dean Martin et al. Didn't Disney World drain the Everglades to install mechanical alligators?
The circumstances of them discussing it for 10 years, it really wasn't a shock. There were times when it looked like they would never get together and to do what they wanted to do. There were so many people involved in trying to convert it to something else. So it's not like we weren't aware of it. It was in the newspapers regularly. And when it did come, I guess we all knew it was coming, we just didn't know when.
After 35 years of spinning up there, the top of the mart took one last turn and closed forever in August. Jed Stedman was neither terribly philosophic nor saddened by it all. His years in the upsy-down lounge business before this gig prepared him to accept it as just another turn of events. The hand-carved wooden medallions honoring the city's Mardi Gras cruise were sold off a few weeks after our visit. Gone are the huge paintings of early pioneers discovering and claiming the Mississippi River. Watching the river flow past his doorstep 33 floors below, you can imagine how Stedman can be more accepting than most.
I have to look at the good side of it, is that it's been just a pleasure showing off the city and the state to millions of visitors.
Something about that Old Man River that you can see so clearly from up here. You know, he just keeps rolling along. Postcards used to celebrate our crowning achievements. This herald of the Causeway Bridge reminds us we may be too cool these days to enthuse over achievements like Charity Hospital's graceful deco. Travel this state and you'll notice things are missing. Travel this state some more and you'll want to save them before the only place you can see them is on an old postcard. Cheers, though, because our last site offers natural hope. And this scene comes from the easternmost islands. James Harris is the senior biologist for 7 natural refuges in southeast Louisiana, protected by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Down at the very mouth of the Mississippi River in Venice, he and 2 interns steer us out into the shipping channel aboard a small powerboat. Today we're headed to the southernmost Chandeleur Islands, a crescent-shaped chain at the very eastern edge of Louisiana's boot. As much as we worry today about the erosion of barrier islands, it's an inevitable course of nature that sands shift. The grasses are essential because seabirds won't nest in plain sand. Their young have to have some cover. Louisiana's state bird, the eastern brown pelican, gave up trying to nest here decades ago.
There have been people looking at pelicans and studying pelicans for a long time, even going back to the 20s and 30s. But until the really dramatic declines of the 50s and then into the 60s, I don't know that anybody realized, there may have been a few, but most people didn't realize that there was a problem. With the wide-scale use of a lot of pesticides in the 50s and then into the 60s, of course, here in Louisiana, our state bird was totally extirpated or totally wiped out as far as nesting goes by the early 60s. There weren't any pelicans nesting in Louisiana anymore.
Common seabirds like these laughing gulls never left. The fragility of a new hatched chick is astounding. He's trying to find some shade at noon. Gulls and terns can make their nest nearly anywhere. Pelicans are more fussy. For these elegant and ancient birds, the loss of grassy strips in the Chandeleur chain made Louisiana's coast uninviting.
They weren't going anywhere. They just, they weren't producing enough young to keep up with the numbers that were dying as they got older. So you had a gradual decline and then at some point a very dramatic decline in the population itself. They dropped to very low numbers throughout the country. Right now, I would say that habitat restoration and habitat protection is the priority. The birds are protected by law. You can't collect the eggs, you can't collect the birds, but they need some place to go. They need some place to nest. And it's not just their nesting habitat that needs protection. It's the entire watersheds, the entire estuary systems, the entire coastline. That's what produces the food that supports the pelicans and the other seabirds that are out here. On this island and some of the other ones, there are some raccoons.
Oh.
There are raccoons.
It's just amazing.
They float out on trash that comes out of the river.
Really?
Seriously. The islands within the Chandeleur chain are all protected within the National Wildlife Refuge system as part of Brett National Wildlife Refuge. Yeah. We have pelicans nesting on 4 different islands right now. This island here has, you can see the large groups in the background there, has over 5,000 nesting pair on this island alone.
That's the highest number biologists have ever recorded. The simple story you can see and hear is that the pelicans are back.
But when you consider that back in the 60s, there were no pelicans nesting in Louisiana. So this is quite a comeback for them. This is a great success story. Beginning in the late 60s, early 70s, the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries took the initiative to bring birds in from Florida. And in this part of the state, they established them at North Island, up at the north end of the chain. And they started with just a few hundred birds. And from that, the population has grown and expanded and spread to other islands in the chain, so that now we'll have anywhere from 10 to 16,000 nests in a year. And to me, that's quite remarkable.
Now that they're coming back, the moral in the story is that we should just plain leave this corner of a nearly lost Louisiana alone. Join us again for another edition of Lost Louisiana, when you and I will be going in search of picture-perfect postcards. Boy, I've got an idea. The Hotel Heidelberg is still standing in Baton Rouge. This is awfully sweet. Huey Long used to stay here. Until next time, having a wonderful time. Glad you were here.